As I completed multicultural literature, the one thing I can say is I have not now read many different types of literature that I would not have chosen in the past. By reading literature from different cultural perspectives, I have increased my understanding of different culture groups and look at things somewhat differently. Differently in a good way, though. At the beginning of the course, the focus was on note taking skills and gathering information as I read. This was extremely helpful as I learned what type of note taking style worked best for me, as well as the amount of information I needed to include to use as a reference for later on in class. Another area that I grew as a learner was in my ability to organize my time. The multicultural literature class required us to read several notes on our own time. By doing this, I learned how to organize my day to allow time to read to complete the assignment. That was very different as there was no specific timeline in which to read the novel, so I had to be organized. The idea that made the biggest impact on me was that of discrimination after reading The Souls of Black Folk and the short story Sweetness. I was able to get an understanding of how African Americans saw discrimination from their point of view. Both of these pieces of literature looked at the issue from a different perspective. Dubai's novel took a stance on discrimination. He published his essays to show the public how African Americans deserve the same opportunity as white people. Dubai was very vocal about segregation, discrimination, and Jim Crow laws. Dubai discusses how fences represent the segregation in the world and divide the opportunities that white people are given from those denied to black people. He wrote in his novel, I think I never before quite realized the place of the fence in civilization. To him, the fence represented segregation and missed opportunities. In the short story Sweetness describes a black mother who has accepted her race's role in society. Her daughter is born with extremely dark skin, and the mother feels it is her job to help her daughter learn to be invisible to the white world. The short story shows the reader how some members of the black community felt that segregation and discrimination was just way of life. They needed to accept it and not try to change it. This made a huge impact on me. I never thought that some African Americans just accepted segregation and discrimination. In reading various pieces of history, we always learned how the African Americans fought for equality. I learned a lot from reading the different perspectives. The new historicism literature theory has an impact on my understanding of different types of multicultural literature. This theory states that all literature is a product of the time, place, and historical circumstances. When a person reads a piece of literature with this literary theory in mind, you cannot read the work in isolation. So for me, the knowledge I had of segregation and discrimination played a part in me understanding the topic. This also helped me gain a greater understanding when I read the short story Sweetness, for example. I had only thought of the topic of inequality from the point of view in which I was taught in school. The author Toni Morrison talked about the same issue but from a different perspective. This broadened my knowledge base of inequality. The new historicism theory encourages diversity of historical context, which is what happened for me when I read the various pieces of literature. The author in this literary theory is product of time and place, and their work reflects who they are as a person. This is true in both pieces of work that made an impact on me. It also allowed me to see how both pieces are interconnected, which supports this theory. In today's world, since we are so globally connected, I feel that most people feel that discrimination is a negative type of behavior. I also feel that discrimination is a product of society. When W.E.B. Du Bois was writing his essays, discrimination was considered commonplace, so the majority of white people had the same viewpoint of the subject. Today, we are so aware of human rights and equality that there are not many people who would feel that discrimination is okay. Those that do disagree probably hang with their own social group and stay isolated from the rest of society. Upon completion of the course, the one piece of information I will use outside the classroom is the understanding of different perspectives. Reading different pieces of literature has allowed me to see how various culture groups look at situations differently. I now know that my view of different topics is not the only view there is, and it might not be the right view on a situation. I have to be open to understanding and listening to different people and hearing what they might have to say about a topic.